This might sound like some drama series, but I assure you guys, this is my real life. I never expected to find myself in this situation, being accused of theft in the middle of my sister in law's wedding, of all places. But then again, I never imagined that my relationship with Emily, my husband's sister, would turn into such a mess. It all started years before the wedding, long before I had any idea Emily would grow to resent me so much. When I first met John, her brother, it was like something out of a romantic novel. We met at a coffee shop, of all places, where I spilled my latte on him. He was gracious about it, even laughing, and somehow that awkward moment turned into a conversation that lasted hours. We exchanged numbers, went on a couple of dates, and before I knew it, we were inseparable. John came from an affluent family, and while I wasn't exactly struggling, I didn't grow up with the kind of money his family had. I was raised in a modest household where we worked hard for what we had, and my parents taught me to be independent. I never felt insecure about it, but it became clear early on that John's family, especially Emily, saw things differently. I remember the first time John introduced me to his family at one of their many fancy dinners. His parents were polite, but Emily, she barely looked at me. She acted as though I was invisible. And when she did acknowledge me, it was with subtle barbs about my clothes or my job. She made it clear that I didn't fit into their world, and it didn't take long before I realized she wasn't just indifferent. She actively disliked me. I couldn't figure out why at first, but the more time I spent around her, the clearer it became. Emily and John had always been close, maybe too close. They grew up in an environment where they relied on each other heavily, especially after their father had a health scare when they were young. Emily, being the eldest, became the second in command of sorts. And John leaned on her for advice on everything. So when I came into his life, I think she saw me as a threat, someone who was taking her place in her brother's life. John, to his credit, never let her attitude affect our relationship. He was incredibly supportive and made it clear to Emily that I was here to stay. But that only seemed to fuel her dislike for me. Every time I tried to engage with her, whether it was by complimenting her, asking about her work, or even offering to help at family gatherings, she would shut me down with one-liners that left me feeling small. The worst part was that John's parents never stepped in. They were always polite but distant, like they didn't want to get involved in whatever unspoken feud was brewing between Emily and me. It was almost as though they thought it was something we would work out on our own. Spoiler alert, we didn't. Fast forward a couple of years and John proposed. We had a beautiful small ceremony. Nothing extravagant, just a gathering of close friends and family. Of course, Emily was there, but even on our wedding day, she kept her distance. She didn't offer any congratulations, no smiles or warmth, just her usual cold, calculating demeanor. I remember John joking that Emily would probably smile more at her own wedding than she did at ours, but even then, I didn't think too much of it. Things got worse after our wedding. Emily's disdain for me seemed to grow. Anytime we were at family gatherings, she would drop passive-aggressive comments about how fast John and I had gotten married, or how I was lucky that John was such a patient man. There was always this underlying sense that she was waiting for our relationship to fail, like she was convinced I wasn't worthy of her brother. Still, I tried to brush it off. After all, she was family now, and I didn't want to cause any unnecessary tension. But then Emily got engaged last year, and that's when everything really came to a head. Emily's engagement was like something out of a fairy tale. Her fiancé, Derek, was from an equally wealthy family, and their engagement was celebrated like a royal event. I wasn't surprised when I wasn't asked to be part of the bridal party. In fact, I expected it. What I didn't expect was how far Emily would go to make it clear that I wasn't welcome at any of the pre-wedding festivities. John and I were invited to the engagement party, but Emily made sure to avoid me the entire night. I was fine with that. I'd gotten used to her icy demeanor, but things really took a turn when she flat out told John that she didn't want me involved in any of the bridal showers, bachelorette party, or even the wedding planning itself. She didn't want me in the way, as she put it. It hurt, but I tried not to let it get to me. I knew Emily had her own issues and I didn't want to cause any drama. John, on the other hand, was livid. He confronted her about it, telling her that I was his wife and should be included in the family events. But Emily wouldn't budge. She stood her ground, saying that I wasn't family enough to be part of her special day. That was the first major crack in their relationship. John and Emily had never fought before, but now there was a growing rift between them. And I felt like it was my fault, even though I hadn't done anything wrong. The months leading up to the wedding were tense. Every time we saw John's family, there was an unspoken tension in the air. Emily acted like nothing was wrong, but her passive-aggressive comments were sharper than ever. At one point, she even joked that she hoped her wedding would be the last wedding in the family for a long time. A clear dig at our supposedly rushed marriage. I bit my tongue, for John's sake, but inside I was boiling. Finally, the wedding day arrived. It was a grand affair. Exactly what you'd expect from Emily, an over-the-top venue, expensive decorations, and an endless guest list. Despite everything, I decided to attend with a positive attitude. I wasn't going to let Emily's behavior ruin the day. Especially for John. He loved his sister. No matter how she treated me, I didn't want to create more tension. From the moment we arrived, though, I could feel the cold stares. Emily barely acknowledged me, and her friends, who had clearly heard her version of events, were equally distant. It was like I was invisible again, but I was used to it by now. John was supportive as always, trying to keep things light-hearted, but even he couldn't ignore the tension. We stayed at our table for most of the reception, away from the main commotion. Then, halfway through the night, everything fell apart. I remember sitting at our table talking to John when I saw Emily storming towards us. Her face flushed with anger. My first thought was that something had gone wrong with the wedding, but when she got closer, I realized her anger was directed at me. She came to me and asked, "Where was it?" I was completely taken aback and confused. I asked her, "Where's what?" And her answer was her wedding ring. She further said that she knew I took it. For a second, I didn't even know how to respond. I was in shock. I hadn't been anywhere near Emily all day, and now she was accusing me of stealing her wedding ring? I told her I didn't take anything. Tried to wrap my head around the accusation. But Emily wasn't listening. She was too far gone in her anger, and the next thing I knew, she was calling over her parents and demanding they call the police. John tried to intervene, telling her she was being ridiculous, but she was adamant. She wanted the police to search me right then and there in front of everyone. I've never been more humiliated in my life. The police arrived, and in front of the entire wedding party, they searched my purse, my pockets, everything. I kept telling them I hadn't done anything, but the looks I was getting from Emily and her friends made it clear that no one believed me. It was like they were all just waiting for the cops to find the ring and confirm their suspicions. But they didn't find anything because, of course, I hadn't taken it. I thought that would be the end of it. I expected Emily to apologize, maybe admit that she had overreacted, but instead she doubled down, insisting that I must have hidden it somewhere else. It was only after the police asked the entire wedding party to stay calm and started searching other guests that the truth finally came out. They found the ring in the possession of Emily's own mother-in-law. She had taken it earlier in the evening, supposedly to keep it safe, but had forgotten about it in the chaos of the day. While everybody seemed confused and shocked, the cops arrested Emily's mother-in-law. I thought for sure Emily would apologize then, but instead she targeted all her rage towards me again, accusing me of causing unnecessary drama and ruining her wedding. She claimed that if I hadn't been so defensive, none of this would have happened and her mother-in-law wouldn't have been arrested. I was speechless. How could she still find a way to blame me after everything that had just happened? I hadn't stolen her ring. I hadn't called the cops. I hadn't done anything except defend myself when she publicly humiliated me in front of everyone at her wedding. And yet somehow in her mind, I was the one responsible for ruining her day. John was furious. He confronted Emily right there in front of everyone, telling her she was being unreasonable. I could tell he was trying to hold back, not wanting to make a bigger scene than there already was. But his patience had clearly run out. He demanded that she apologize not just to me, but to everyone else for the chaos she had caused by jumping to conclusions. Emily, however, wasn't backing down. She was determined to stand her ground, insisting that I had blown things out of proportion and made the situation worse. Her parents, who had been silent up until that point, finally spoke up, but they didn't exactly take my side. They didn't outright accuse me of anything, but their half-hearted attempt to defuse the situation didn't help either. They seemed more concerned about keeping up appearances in front of their guests than actually addressing the fact that their daughter had falsely accused me of theft. It was like they were trying to smooth things over without really acknowledging what had happened. At that point, I just wanted to leave. I was fuming, and to be honest, after all this time of me tolerating Emily, I didn't mind picking a fight with her. The entire situation was surreal, and the longer it went on, the more I felt like I was trapped in some kind of nightmare. I tugged at John's arm, signaling that I wanted to go, and thankfully he agreed. We left the reception early, walking past dozens of guests who were whispering and staring as we made our way out. I felt a mix of anger and humiliation, but more than anything, I was exhausted. Exhausted from trying to navigate a relationship with a woman who had clearly decided she would never accept me. That night, as we drove home in silence, I couldn't help but wonder if I was somehow at fault. Had I done something to provoke this? Could I have handled things differently? But deep down, I knew the answer. I hadn't done anything wrong. Emily had made me her scapegoat because it was easier for her to blame me than to take responsibility for her own actions. The next day, the fallout began. Word had spread quickly among the family, and before I knew it, I was receiving calls and texts from various relatives, all with their own opinions on what had happened. Some expressed sympathy, telling me they couldn't believe Emily had accused me like that. Others, however, hinted that maybe I should have handled things differently, that I should have just let it go for the sake of keeping the peace. It was like I couldn't win. No matter what I had done, there would always be people who thought I was in the wrong. John, for his part, was fully on my side. He was livid with Emily, and over the next few days, he had several heated conversations with her about the whole ordeal. But Emily wasn't budging. In her mind, I was still the villain, and she wasn't about to let go of that narrative. She even had the nerve to tell John that if I hadn't made such a fuss, her mother-in-law wouldn't have been arrested in the first place, as if I somehow had control over the entire situation. Emily, on the other hand, was doubling down on her version of events, and she was telling anyone who would listen that I had overreacted and I was the one who had caused the real drama. According to her, I should have just accepted her accusation quietly and dealt with it privately, without involving the police. The fact that she was the one who called the cops in the first place didn't seem to matter to her. I didn't hear from Emily directly after the wedding, but John did. They had a few tense conversations over the next week, and from what I gathered, Emily was still furious. She insisted that I had ruined her special day and that I was the reason her mother-in-law had been arrested in front of all the guests. It didn't matter that the truth had come out. Emily needed someone to blame, and I was the easiest target. At this point, I wasn't sure how things would ever get better between us. Emily had made it clear that she would never accept me as part of the family, and after what had happened at the wedding, I didn't see how I could ever have a normal relationship with her. John tried to stay neutral, but I could tell he was torn between his loyalty to his sister and his support for me. It was a difficult position for him to be in, and I hated that he was stuck in the middle of all this. But one thing was clear. I wasn't going to apologize for something I hadn't done. I had spent years trying to make things work with Emily, trying to get along with her for the sake of John and the family, but now I was done playing nice. So, Reddit, I turn to you, AITA, for defending myself and not just accepting the blame to keep the peace on Emily's wedding day. So it's been a couple of days since the wedding, and to be honest, things have only gotten worse. John has been my rock through all of this, but his family, especially his parents, have been giving us the cold shoulder. It's like there's this unspoken tension every time we interact with them. They're not outright saying I'm to blame, but the looks they give me, the way they avoid eye contact, it's pretty clear they hold me responsible for what happened at Emily's wedding. Emily, of course, is still livid. She hasn't spoken to us since that disastrous day, and it seems like she's going out of her way to avoid any direct communication. At first, I thought maybe she just needed time to calm down, but then I started hearing things through mutual friends and acquaintances. Apparently, she's been telling anyone who will listen that I ruined her wedding on purpose. According to her, I've always been jealous of her, and somehow I plotted this whole drama to sabotage her special day. It's absolutely absurd. But the worst part, some people are actually believing it. I was shocked when I first heard these rumors. Me? Jealous of Emily? If anything, I had spent years trying to get along with her, trying to fit into a family that always made me feel like an outsider. I had no reason to want to ruin her day, but Emily is twisting the story in her favor and people are eating it up. I even heard that she's telling people I intentionally made a scene with the cops to embarrass her in front of all her guests. It's like she's completely rewriting the narrative, making herself the victim and me the villain. John has been trying to handle it, but it's clear he's struggling. He loves his family, and I know this whole situation is breaking his heart. He's tried reaching out to Emily a few times, hoping to smooth things over and at least open up some kind of dialogue, but she won't listen. Every time he calls, she either ignores him or brushes him off. The one time he did manage to get her on the phone, she refused to talk about what happened and instead went off on a rant about how I've always been a problem and how she knew I'd ruin her wedding. John is trying to stay patient, saying we should give it time and let things cool down. But I don't know. The way Emily is spreading these lies and turning people against me, I feel like things will never go back to the way they were. Not that the way they were was all that great to begin with, but at least there was a facade of civility. Now, I'm not sure if there's any coming back from this. It's not just Emily either. Her friends and some of John's cousins, even a few of our mutual acquaintances, have started to distance themselves from us. I keep catching wind of more and more rumors being spread about how I caused all the drama. And it's exhausting trying to defend myself when it feels like everyone's already made up their minds. It's like being on trial in the court of public opinion. No matter what I say, I'm guilty because Emily has painted me that way. John's parents have been polite but distant. His mom, especially, seems to be tiptoeing around the subject whenever we talk. But there's this undercurrent of tension that wasn't there before. It's like they're trying to act like nothing happened, but at the same time, I can feel the shift in how they treat me. They used to at least make an effort to include me in family things, but now I barely hear from them. It's like I've been quietly pushed to the sidelines. The worst part is I can't shake this feeling of isolation. I never really had the strongest relationship with John's family, but now it feels like they've all circled the wagons around Emily, leaving me out in the cold. I can't even go to family gatherings without feeling like everyone's watching me, waiting for me to do something wrong. The whole situation is just exhausting. And I hate that it's affecting John so much. He's caught in the middle of this mess, torn between supporting me and dealing with the fallout from his family, and I can see the toll it's taking on him. Despite all of this, John's been incredibly supportive. He reassures me every day that none of this is my fault and that Emily's the one who created all this drama. But I can tell it's weighing on him. He's close to his family, and this whole ordeal is straining those relationships in a way that I don't know if we'll ever fully recover from. I've even caught him staying up late, scrolling through messages or looking lost in thought. It's heartbreaking. I've spent hours thinking about how I could have handled things differently, but the truth is, I didn't have much of a choice. Emily's the one who made the public accusation, and it's not like I could have stopped the cops from doing their job once they were involved. Yet somehow in her mind, and apparently in the minds of half the people who were at the wedding, it's all my fault. Honestly, I don't know what to do at this point. Part of me thinks maybe I should just let it go and try to move on. But how do you move on when your reputation has been dragged through the mud? And how do you rebuild a relationship with people who seem to think the worst of you? I'm trying to stay positive, but it's hard. What makes it a little easier is the overwhelming support I've received from you guys. It's such a bittersweet feeling knowing that complete strangers on the internet have shown more kindness and understanding than people I've known for years. Your advice and words of encouragement have kept me grounded through this whole nightmare, and I can't thank you enough for that. It's been a weird, lonely few days, but knowing I'm not alone in how I feel has made all the difference. I'm not sure what's going to happen next. John says we should just give it more time, but I'm starting to wonder if time is even enough to fix what's broken. Okay, a lot has happened since my last update, and honestly, I wasn't planning on posting again. But things have escalated in a way I never could have imagined. I thought the drama would start to die down after the wedding fiasco, but I was wrong. If anything, things have only gotten crazier. So remember when I mentioned that Emily's mother-in-law, let's call her Cheryl, was the one who had the missing ring on the wedding day? At first, everyone thought it was just a big misunderstanding and she got wrongfully arrested for stealing the ring. Cheryl claimed she had picked it up to keep it safe during the chaos of the reception and had forgotten she had it. Seemed plausible, right? Well, apparently that's not the full story. A few days after the wedding, some more unsettling details started to surface. Turns out Cheryl and Emily don't exactly get along. In fact, they've had a pretty rocky relationship ever since Emily and Greg, her fiancé, got serious. I guess Cheryl never thought Emily was the right fit for her son, and she made it pretty clear in subtle and not so subtle ways. From what I've heard, Cheryl always had this underlying resentment towards Emily, especially when it came to how much control Emily had over Greg's life. Now, here's where things get really crazy. Apparently, Cheryl didn't just accidentally take the ring. She took it on purpose, hoping to cause enough of a scene to derail the wedding or at least create some kind of disruption. The more I heard about it, the more it became clear that Cheryl's plan wasn't just about the ring. It was about sending a message. She wanted to ruin Emily's big day in a way that would be humiliating, but not easily traceable back to her. And when Emily immediately accused me of stealing it, Well, Cheryl just sat back and let the chaos unfold. At first, Cheryl denied everything. She stuck to her story that it was all just an unfortunate misunderstanding and that she had no ill intentions. But things took a major turn when Greg, Emily's new husband, confronted her. He had apparently heard rumors from some family members that Cheryl had been making snide remarks about Emily leading up to the wedding. So he asked her point blank what really happened with the ring. From what I have heard, it didn't take long for Cheryl to crack. She broke down and admitted that she had taken the ring intentionally. She told Greg that she wasn't happy about the marriage and thought that if she caused enough drama at the wedding, maybe it would give Greg second thoughts or at least delay the whole thing. She even hinted that she hoped Emily's family would see her in a negative light after the whole debacle. I was floored when I heard this. It was like something out of a soap opera. Greg was furious, as you can imagine. I don't know the exact details of their conversation, but Greg later told Emily the whole story, and again, from what I've heard, Emily was absolutely devastated. Not only was her own mother-in-law trying to sabotage her wedding, but the truth coming out after the fact just added insult to injury. To make matters worse, Emily had let me take the fall for the missing ring without bothering to figure out what really happened. When I found out, I couldn't believe it. John was livid when I told him. He felt like his sister had betrayed us in the worst possible way. I mean, Emily knew that Cheryl had taken the ring, even if she hadn't known it at the time. She knew afterward when Greg told her the truth, and instead of coming clean, she stayed silent. She let me be blamed for causing drama at her wedding, even though she knew it wasn't my fault. John and I confronted Emily immediately after we found out. We didn't hold back. I called her out for letting me take the blame, for staying quiet while rumors spread, and for not having the decency to admit that Cheryl was behind the whole thing. At first, Emily tried to brush it off, saying it wasn't a big deal and that she was just trying to keep the peace. But when John pressed her, she finally admitted that she had been too embarrassed to tell the truth. She didn't want to deal with the fallout of Cheryl's actions, so she figured it was easier to let me take the blame. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Emily admitted to John's face that she had let me be the scapegoat because she was too embarrassed to confront Cheryl and deal with the truth. She said that with everything going on that day, she didn't want to face another family scandal, so she let it slide, even though she knew it wasn't right. Her excuse? She didn't want to ruin her wedding even more by getting into a fight with Cheryl, so that she let the whole thing play out and hoped it would blow over. Needless to say, that was the last straw for us. John was beyond furious. He told Emily that he couldn't believe she would betray him like that. Emily had put her own brother in an impossible position, all to avoid confronting her mother-in-law. John told her that until she could own up to her actions and make things right, he didn't want to have anything to do with her. We left Emily's house that day feeling completely shattered. I thought things were bad before, but this was a level of betrayal I never expected. John has since cut off all contacts with her. He's blocking her on everything, phone, social media, the works. He's done. I can't blame him. Emily showed her true colors. It's not something either of us can just move past. We're both still reeling from all of this. I keep thinking back to the wedding day, to that moment when Emily accused me of stealing the ring in front of everyone, and now I know she was doing it to cover up her own embarrassment. It's like everything that happened that day was a lie, a cover-up to protect herself from the truth about her own mother-in-law. Right now, we're just trying to process it all. John and I have been talking a lot about where we go from here, and honestly, we're both still in shock. The betrayal from Emily runs deep, and I'm not sure there's any way to repair the damage. As for Cheryl, I don't know what's going to happen there. Greg is furious with his mother, but Emily? I have no idea how she's handling things now that everything's come to light. I never thought things would escalate to this level, and yet here we are. It's a mess, and I don't know what the future holds for any of us. All I know is that I'm done trying to make peace with people who don't care about the truth. Hello, Reddit. It's been a whirlwind these last few days, and I can honestly say that John and I are finally at a place where we can breathe again. After everything that's happened, Emily's betrayal, Cheryl's confession, the rumors, it's been a lot to take in. We've decided to take a step back from John's family for the time being. We both need space to process everything and figure out where to go from here. It wasn't an easy decision, especially for John, but we've realized that we can't keep trying to make things work with people who aren't willing to be honest or supportive. After John confronted Emily and cut off contact with her, we expected some sort of fallout from his parents. Sure enough, they reached out, but not in the way we'd hoped. Instead of acknowledging what had happened or trying to mend things, they were more concerned about keeping the family peace and insisted that we should forgive and forget to avoid more drama. They downplayed the severity of what Emily did and basically asked us to move on without addressing any of the hurt she caused. It was clear that they were more interested in keeping up appearances than actually resolving the situation. John has always been close to his family, and it hurt him to see them brush aside everything that had happened. He tried explaining to them how betrayed he felt, not just for Emily, but by the whole family's reaction. Instead of supporting him or even acknowledging how wrong Emily was, they acted like it was just a misunderstanding that we should get over for the sake of family unity. We both realized that continuing to engage with his family right now would only lead to more frustration. So we made the difficult choice to distance ourselves from them for the time being. Emily, as expected, is still playing the victim. She's refused to take any responsibility for what happened, and she's still spreading lies about me being jealous of her and trying to sabotage her wedding. At this point, though, I honestly don't care anymore. I've spent enough time stressing over her lies, and I'm done trying to defend myself to people who are determined to believe whatever version of the story suits them. One thing that has been really eye-opening throughout all of this is the support we've received from people outside of John's immediate family. Some of his extended family members who heard about the situation reached out to us and offered their support. A few of them even told us that they weren't surprised by Cheryl's actions or Emily's behavior, which was both validating and sad to hear. It's nice to know that not everyone has been swayed by Emily's version of events, but it also shows just how deep the dysfunction runs in this family. As for Cheryl and Greg, things are still a bit of a mystery. We haven't heard much from them since Greg confronted his mother about the ring, but from what I gather, their relationship is strained. I can't imagine how complicated that must be for him, but it's not our place to get involved in their issues anymore. We have enough of our own to deal with. I want to thank everyone who's offered advice and support throughout this whole ordeal. The kind words from strangers on the internet have been such a comfort, especially when we felt so isolated. It's been a tough few weeks, but knowing that there are people out there who understand and have gone through similar experiences has made us feel less alone. Your encouragement has meant more than you know. For now, John and I are taking things one day at a time. We're focusing on healing, on each other, and on the life we want to build together. No more family drama, no more lies, just us, moving forward. Stay tuned for more stories from our girl relationships.